All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Raha Kwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in this truth in all sincerity. Ecclesiasticus chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. A wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. As the judge of the people is himself, so are his officers. And what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein. An unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. So this was a post that I came across yesterday on Facebook, and this is President Trump basically telling Iran that they have 48 hours to open the Strait of Hormuz or face hell. So we fast forward to earlier this morning here, and today is April 5th. So we fast forward to approximately 8 a.m. this morning, if I'm correct. So Donald Trump this morning, aka Nero, put on Truth Social this morning, April 5th, 2026, at approximately 8:03 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tuesday, that's this coming Tuesday the 7th, will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking street, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. President Donald J. Trump. So that is accurate. That is not a hacked, his account being hacked or anything like that. That is unhinged Trump going on social media on his Truth Social account and typing that. Just like that, verbatim. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. So there it is. This guy is straight up unhinged, and right about now, there's no chill to Nero, and really, it ain't no telling what this dude may say or do next, just to get his point across. Trump right now is figuring, hell, I can't run for president again. They're trying to throw me in jail. The moment my term is up, they may try to throw me in jail, especially if a Democrat becomes president in 2028, if there even is another election. But if you factor in the Democrats may take the House and Senate during the midterms, and if you get a Democrat president in 2028, because right about now, damn near everybody is against this war. Even MAGA is turning against Trump right about now. So if you get a Democratic Congress and Senate, as well as the executive branch for the midterms here and then again in 2028, Trump could be looking at all types of jail time. So right about now, he's completely unhinged, and there's really no telling what he may do next. It's basically, I might as well do this shit now, since this is what they're going to try to do to me later on. So, and, I just said this in the video I uploaded about 2 days ago. Trump doesn't care at all what's going to happen with the Strait of Hormuz. That is not his, in terms of we really need the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened. Trump doesn't care about that. Trump wants that strait to remain closed and blocked off as long as possible. That is the reason why, he's trying to, he has troops right now in Greenland, securing oil reserves up that way. He's trying to strong arm Canada. I went over all of this a couple of nights ago in a video I put up. And so you know, like I said, he's getting a certain percentage of oil now from Greenland. He's doing what he's trying to do in Canada. He's tapping into the U.S. oil reserves, specifically down in the Gulf of America. It used to be known as the Gulf of Mexico. He's basically snatched up Venezuela's oil, you know, and, I'm really starting to believe that Nero sent troops to Ecuador to get a hold of their oil as well. Even though the reason that they may publicly give was to combat narco terrorism and organized crime and drug trafficking into the U.S., ultimately, Nero's going to try to strike a deal to gain access to Ecuador's oil as well. He's going to say, hey, we helped you guys take care of your cartel problem down here, so we need some of that oil now. So it's the same thing in Cuba and Colombia. Colombia is a significant producer of oil. They have over 2 billion barrels worth of reserves. Cuba's reserves are still pretty much underdeveloped, but it's still somewhere in the range of 125 million barrels. So right about now, Nero is trying to lock down the entire Western Hemisphere's, majority oil reserves while knocking out one of the key Eastern Hemisphere's major oil routes, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And we know that pretty much, Europe, a lot of their oil goes through that strait, as well as, Asia as well. So Nero wants the Strait of Hormuz to be fucked up. He's in no rush for that shit to reopen. No matter what he's trying to say or portray, for what he's trying to do with the oil reserves in the Eastern Hemisphere, starting with Greenland all the way down through Venezuela and now potentially even Ecuador, he's going to knock out one of the key oil transportation routes in the Strait of Hormuz. This forces European nations and Asian nations, potentially even, those nations in Northern Africa. This forces them to do business with the United States. And so don't think for 1 second Trump gives two shits about whether or not the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. Ultimately, he wants to see that shit shut down for as long as possible while he's locking up all of the oil reserves over here on this side of the world. So whether you want to call this genius or insane, ultimately this is part of the reason why the beast will come to hate the whore and burn her with fire. And that's, as per the book of Revelation. We can go into Revelation here. That's verse 17. And I'm going to read verses 16 and 17 in the KJV. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate, and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of Allahayim shall be fulfilled. And I'll read verse 18 in the NLT. And this woman you saw in your vision represents the great city that rules over the kings of the world. And that's exactly what you're seeing right now. The whore right now is trying to strong arm all of the kings of the world. Look, we shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and he's going to try to make it look like it's their fault. He's going to basically say, hey, listen, when I was asking you guys, you NATO nations, to help me make Iraq reopen the strait, all of you turned your backs on me. Spain, I believe, who else? Great Britain, Germany, France. He's going to basically say, all of you guys turned your backs on me. I was always there for you. The U.S. was always there for you when you needed us. But when I needed your help to reopen the strait, and You need that oil more than we do. We don't get our oil from the Strait of Hormuz. This is what Nero's going to basically tell these guys. The U.S., we don't get our oil from that place, but you do. And when we needed your help to reopen it, you turned your backs on us. So, and that woman you saw in the vision represents the great city, the group that rules over the kings of the world, as verse 18 shows us. This is why, the beast is going to come to hate the whore, and this is, at least one of the reasons why, I should say, Nero's doing way more than that, right about now. But this right here is the current event. This is where, the eyes of the general public, the eyes of the world are watching everything that's happening in this particular region of the world. And so, when we're watching this stuff play out, you can understand why the nations are becoming upset, why they're becoming mad, and eventually they're going to burn the beast with fire. So I'm sorry, they're going to burn the whore, I should say, the whore with fire. But let's go into Jeremiah verse 51. I'll scroll down to 6 or 7. Verse 7, Jeremiah 51 and 7. KJV, Babylon hath been a golden cup in Yahweh Bashem Yahushai's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. And that's precisely what's happening right now. NATO has always conducted business with this country. And now they're at a point where they're starting to feel that, the way that the U.S. is conducting business with them, they're looking at it like, yo, we're supposed to be your allies. Why are you bullying us with these? Why are you using these type of tactics on us? So the nations now, they're pretty much reaching that point where, and these spats right now, what's going on between these NATO nations and Nero, this ain't stuff that's happening behind closed doors. This is stuff that's making it to the public. Trump is basically saying, we getting the hell out of NATO. We don't need these dudes anymore. We don't need them anymore. NATO is basically saying, man, the way that you're doing business now, America, is not, conducive to, being known as the leader of the free world here. So both sides, though, are complicit in a lot of this stuff that's going on. It's just that right now, NATO is starting to get tired of it because it's starting to affect them. Whereas in the past, where there's stuff that whatever America did, NATO was able to benefit off of it as well. Whereas Trump has basically cut them off from a lot of stuff here. A lot of those agreements and, pacts and stuff like that. Trump got rid of a lot of that stuff where they were getting hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Trump has cut that off, and now they're at a point where they're not even getting as much oil as they were getting because this particular strait is closed. And we saw what Trump just said, in less than 48 hours from now, Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. And then he goes on to mock them, just watch, praise be to Allah. That's what Nero said. That's what he typed. And no, I don't think that's somebody that, somebody that takes care of his social media accounts doing that. No, I think that was Nero himself that typed that shit. It just goes to show you where his mind is at. And, he feels like, hey, these guys didn't want to help me open it, where they would have had a say in how we can do this. So cool. Right about now, I'll go in there and destroy this whole shit. And now I'm going to force them to do business with America now. Now, not only are we possibly going to leave NATO, but if you don't do business with us now and get your oil from us, we're definitely going to leave NATO. So this is what he's doing. He's trying to paint them into a corner. trying to bring them to their knees, basically. And he's trying to show them who's boss. You're not going to defy us. When we call for your help, you better be there to help us. And that's basically what he's trying to do here. And, right about now, he may think this is a genius idea and plan. And if you're just casually watching these events play out, you may say to yourself that, destroying the Strait of Hormuz to the point that desperate nations now will be forced to do business with you. You may think that's a good idea as well, if you're just casually watching this, but, there's scriptures, man, that warn us about, these types of business practices, so to speak. And let's go to Proverbs 11:1. A false balance is an abomination to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, but a just weight is his delight. And so we're seeing a false balance right here starting to play out. Like I said earlier, you're locking down like damn near half of the oil reserves in Greenland. You're trying to strong arm Canada into giving you access to their oil reserves, or you're trying to make them the 51st state or whatever so that you can have access to it. You basically are in the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America right now. You don't care that there's a whole whale species down there and a turtle species down there that you're about to drive extinct because you're about to start digging there. You're about to start, going there for, tapping into that particular oil reserve. Then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, it is Venezuela, potentially Ecuador, as well as Cuba and Colombia. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz is closed down right now. It's only really accessible to, I think, 3 or 4 nations: Russia, China, India, and I'm not very certain about North Korea, but that is one of Iran's allies. So I'm pretty sure if they're even getting their oil from that particular strait, possibly North Korea as well. But this is a false balance. You're locking up all of the oil reserves on this particular side of the earth in the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, you're knocking out one of the key oil transportation routes in the Eastern Hemisphere with the Strait of Hormuz. So this is a false balance, and you're trying to force these nations now to all do business with you. This is why I think I just heard Trump just sometime like yesterday afternoon or something, or maybe late yesterday morning, saying, we are going to make so much money off of this. He was, bragging about something, and I'm pretty sure it has something to do with this here, as far as, the oil, whatever his plans are for oil. I just heard him yesterday saying, we're going to make a fortune off of this. We're going to make so much money. And that was the exact words that he used. We're going to make a fortune off of this. So once again, a false balance is an abomination to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, but a just weight is his delight. You can see, we snatch up all the oil in the Western Hemisphere. We shut down this major oil route here in the Eastern Hemisphere. Everybody now has to come to us, or a lot of their economy is going to start to suffer, and so you're trying to hoard and accumulate all of this particular wealth here. And a lot of this is going to come back to bite you, trying to hoard all of the resources and trying to force everybody to do business with you. So, a lot of this is it's not a balanced scale here, as the scripture tells us in Proverbs 11:1. Let's look at Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. And let's look at this in the NLT as well. Wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Wealth from hard work grows over time. And so this wealth now that you're about to gather, if your plans and schemes come to fruition, this is going to be greatly diminished here. And we read about that a little bit earlier in the book of Revelation, chapter 17, if I'm correct. And there's plenty of scriptures all throughout the Bible where we see how Babylon is going to fall. And so wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. And I wanted to look at vanity real quick in the interlinear. So vanity. So they have here vapor, breath, vapor, vanity, figurative, adverb, vainly. Roman numeral number 2 is vainly. Strong's definition: emptiness or vanity, figuratively something transitory and unsatisfactory, often used as an adverb, altogether vain, vanity. So the Strong's definition of this is, there's emptiness or vanity. Figuratively, there's something transitory and unsatisfactory. So when you look at that and you look at the tactics that Trump is trying to use, it pretty much sums it up right here when you read the Strong's definition. This is emptiness here. This is, Trump actually, he's lacking, there's things that's actually lacking here that, you're not using discretion, especially if you're trying to call yourself the leader of the free world. You are the leader of the world. And, these are the particular type of tactics that you would use. It goes back earlier, this is not a balanced scale. This is, the stuff that this guy is actually trying to do. It's really, you can just see, what bad business practices are with this guy, and why he came under so much scrutiny in the past with, with his casinos and stuff. This is the same type of tactics that he probably was using even with that. But I mean, a lot of people don't really care about the, in that particular world, when you're dealing with people like that, they just believe that the ends justify the means. And he's still using that, that's, we hear that particular term a lot. And it's funny because every single time I've ever heard that term being applied, the ends justify the means, it's always been something messed up. It was never like a good thing. The means were good, and so the ends were good. No, every time you hear that particular phrase, the ends justify the means, it's always the means were fucked up. The means were some foul, shady, even like harmful practices, but hey, we made X amount of money from that, so the ends justify the means. And this is, what that is. It's emptiness, it's vanity. And then it says figuratively something transitory and unsatisfactory. So the Strong's definition, pretty much gives a good little explanation as to what this particular scripture means. And I'll read it one more time. Wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. So I'm not going to make this too much longer. I'm going to end this with Revelation. And I'm going to read this in the NLT, Revelation chapter 18. Verses 3 through 6 in the NLT. For all the nations have fallen because of the wine of her passionate immorality. The kings of the world have committed adultery with her because of her desires for extravagant luxury. The merchants of the world have grown rich. Then I heard another voice calling from heaven, come away from her, my people. Do not take part in her sins, or you will be punished with her. For her sins are piled as high as heaven, and Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai remembers her evil deeds. I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.